All right, guys, good morning. Welcome to day 3 of the Sourdough 101 class. At this point, we're going to go ahead and preheat our oven for 1 hour. Now, if you have a Dutch oven, you're going to want to go ahead and place that inside the oven during this preheat. We want our Dutch oven to act as sort of like a mini oven in this situation. It's going to really help to trap that steam, which will help to give us a really open crumb and will open up that ear of our bread, which gives us that signature sourdough crusty yummy look that we're going for. Okay, now go ahead and take your banneton from the fridge, and we're going to grab a piece of parchment paper. We're going to go ahead and invert our loaf onto our parchment paper, and if you're seeing a lot of excess flour kind of coated and stuck to your bread at this point, go ahead and take a pastry brush and brush off the excess flour. Sometimes we end up with a coating of flour that's not the most appetizing. This might not be necessary, but if you're not liking the look of it, go ahead and give it a good brush. If at this point your loaf is sticking to your banneton, gently remove your loaf by holding the loaf itself with one hand and gently pulling the banneton up until you can help to release that bread skin from your banneton. This is really common. This has happened to me many times. Don't panic if this happens. Just go very slow until it peels itself away. Okay, at this point we get to use our lame finally. You might be using a lame that looks like this. A lame is a French word for a blade, and what we're going to do is we're going to use this blade to score the top of our bread. This is going to give us a great place for our steam to escape as it's baking. As you score, you want to be holding your blade at a 45-degree angle. This is going to allow that signature ear to develop on our bread. You'll notice that the initial score that I make is the deeper of all the scoring. The following scores are more shallow and are more for decoration than anything else. Feel free to score your bread in any way that suits you. As soon as you score the bread, you want to take your Dutch oven out of the oven to prepare it for the next step. You will then grab your parchment with your loaf and place it into your hot Dutch oven, carefully avoiding the sides to avoid burning yourself. If you notice that the parchment is sort of overlapping itself, go ahead and pull up to untuck it a little bit. At this point, I'm going to actually take that spray bottle that I used in the shaping steps, and I'm going to mist the top of my bread a couple times just to encourage even more steam. I'm going to throw the lid on top and then put it in the oven for 25 minutes. So that Dutch oven that we're using is helping to trap some of the steam that's escaping from your bread during the first part of the baking process. That steam is going to help to give us the oven spring that we want to make a really beautiful, soft, fluffy, and open crumb. I would suggest using a pizza stone and a steam bath if you do not have a Dutch oven. Once that 25 minutes is up, you're going to go ahead and remove the lid from your Dutch oven. If you have a steam bath going on the bottom rack, this would be the time that you'd want to take that steam rack out of the oven. We're going to place that back in the oven for another 15 to 18 minutes, depending on the desired crustiness of your bread. If you want a chewier, more dense crust, you'll go ahead and bake it for longer. If you want a softer, more crackly crust, you will bake it for a shorter period of time. The oven will be set at a lower temperature of 450 degrees Fahrenheit for the final part of this bake. All right, it's been 15 minutes and you have a beautiful loaf of bread. Now, it's really important that you let this loaf rest for at least an hour. A lot of people say you should let it rest for upwards of 3 to 4 hours, but that kind of depends on your level of self-control and patience. I tend to like to wait an hour to 2 hours before I cut into the bread, because if you cut into it right away, it still has a lot of moisture. So It's going to be harder to cut. It's going to have kind of like a gummier texture. It's going to get stuck to your knife, and you could compromise the crumb slightly by cutting it early. Trust me, it's worth the wait. All right, guys, congratulations. You have made it to the end of the course. By now, you should have a beautiful, well-baked loaf of sourdough bread that you've made yourself. Now, if yours doesn't look exactly like this one, don't panic. It took me months to figure out how to get a loaf to look like this. The good thing is that even if it doesn't look like this, it's still gonna be probably the best loaf of bread you've ever tasted. The truth is, when you use fresh ingredients, that's beyond any flavor profile that you're ever gonna be able to receive from a bread at a grocery store. I hope you guys enjoyed this process. It can be a little bit daunting and it's sort of a long process, but as you get more familiar with baking sourdough, you can start to alter your timeline a little bit to kind of fit what's going to work for you. You'll also see that there are ways that you can kind of get around some of these regimented stretch and folds and things like that if you know what to look for in the bread. With this basic recipe, you can really kind of go wild. You can start to add in nuts and berries, you can add in fruit, you can change up the way that you're scoring the bread. You can kind of experiment in that way. If you have any questions about anything that you've seen in the videos, please leave notes in the discussion board. Feel free to send me a message and I will try to answer anything that might come up for you along the way. I would love to see photos of your finished product, and each time that you bake, I would love to see updates. Please consider joining my Sourdough Club Facebook group so that you can post photos, questions, and share those with our community. Happy baking!